Namaskar and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonkar. Let's continue our discussion of NCERT Science series. We are discussing Science textbook of class 10 where we are carrying out discussion of each chapter. Today's discussion is about chapter 9, Heredity and Evolution. Now before this, from chapter 1 to chapter 5, we have discussed some important concepts connected to chemistry. After that, we entered into the discussion of biology where we discussed life processes, we discussed control and coordination, and in our latest interaction, we understood how organisms reproduce. We discussed about asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms and sexual reproduction in plants and animals. Now, based on that knowledge itself, we'll build today and understand heredity, that is, how inheritance is passed, that is, genetic inheritance from one generation to another generation. How is it passed? And how does it change? What are the factors because of which we see changes in the genetic information in different generations, which is nothing but evolution. So we'll understand what is the connection between heredity and evolution also. All right, let's begin today's class. But before that, do remember it's now or never, because our P2I classes are closing out. Its admission is closing out today itself. You have just a few hours to enroll for this program. So what are you thinking? Are you still in confusion? Because P2I is the best program for UPSC civil services preparation. Why? Because we will be with you for prelims, for mains, for interview, for all the stages. We will be with you only. It's a comprehensive program where we'll complete your entire syllabus. We have best faculty team. We have prelims test series, preparation for prelims. We have mains residential program. We have mock interviews planned for you. You will get one-to-one mentorship. You will get group mentorship. You can discuss with the retired bureaucrats, with the serving bureaucrats in different sessions. What else is needed? It's complete and integrated package at a very affordable price. Do enroll today. Use my code Rahul Live. I'll see you in the class. Right. Let's begin our discussion of heredity. Now, in our previous interactions, we have understood how organisms reproduce, and we understood two concepts, right? Now, we say the reproduction process can be asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. Now, in both the cases, you need to understand that even if it is asexual reproduction, if it is a cell, the cell's genetic information is present in the nucleus, and you see when it divides, say it undergoes binary fission, then the same genetic information passes to the next progeny or the next generation. Now you will think that if this genetic information is this exactly same with this, you will think that if this is N, then these two would be exactly same. That is why asexual reproduction is also called as clonal reproduction, because it produces exactly same clones. But we will see that there would be some kind of genetic variation in the offsprings, even in the asexual reproduction. Why? We'll all understand that also. But when it comes to sexual reproduction, we have seen if I need an offspring, that offspring, if this is the individual, I am simply telling that it is a multicellular organism for sexual reproduction whose cell it has nucleus. But you do know that the genetic information in this nucleus, it comes from the father's side as well as the mother's side. That means it comes from two entities. For example, in a plant, we have seen sexual reproduction. Flower is the reproductive part. You have stamen, you have pistil. Stamen, that's the androecium, pistil as the gynoecium. Pollen grains will contain half the set of genetic information, and the ovule will contain half the genetic information. When we talk about humans, the sperm, it is going to contain half the genetic information. Ovum, it is going to contain half the genetic information, and when these two combine, you will get complete set of genetic information. Correct? Now, what are we going to discuss? That how this genetic information, it keeps on passing from one generation to another generation. Can there be any specific changes? What are the rules and regulations of this inheritance? All right. Now, to understand that, we first need to understand what is the basic unit. For what is the basic unit of life? We have cell, and in that cell we have a nucleus, and in the nucleus we have chromosomes. So chromosomes are present in the nucleus. I told you, if this is a cell, if this is the nucleus is composed of chromosomes. Now when we dissect this chromosome, or when we look closely, chromosome, it is it is composed of DNA in a dense form, and this DNA is our genetic information. Genetic information. Now, a specific locus of this DNA, it is called a gene. So, a human body, it is made up of different cells. Cell has nucleus. Now, inside this nucleus, you have genetic information, which is called as chromosome. Chromosome, it is a dense form of DNA, and one particular locus of that particular DNA is called a gene. And this gene is responsible for one particular trait. Say, let me just give you an example. Say, this is Rahul sir. Now, Rahul sir has brown eyes. His ear is of this particular structure. He has black hair, not blonde, black hair, right? His height is this much. That means in his genetic information, some section or one particular gene, it translates to his eye color, that he needs to have brown color. Why? We'll talk about that also. His height would be this much. Why? We'll talk about that also. That means in our concept of heredity, we need to understand that your genetic information passes from one generation to next generation, but in the next generation, you will have certain changes to it. Now, it is observed in even asexual reproductive organisms, and in sexual reproductive organisms, you have to see that because it makes sense also. I told you why. All right. Now, the question is, sir, are there any rules of this inheritance? For asexual, it's quite simple because they follow clonal reproduction, and even in them also we'll find some sort of genetic variation. Why? Because they need to survive. That means the changes in genetic information is according to the environment. Now, in the organisms with sexual reproduction, they have inherent mixture of genes, and their genes would also be changing corresponding to environment. We'll talk about that in some time. But are there any rules and regulations which are followed, especially in sexual reproduction? When I talk about inheritance, this pertains to sexual reproduction. All right. Now, as I told you, our body is composed of cells. Cell has nucleus. Nucleus has chromosome. Chromosome is dense form of DNA, and a specific locus on that DNA is called a gene. And what is this gene? Gene translates to certain trait. Now, what will this gene do? Say, for instance, I told you Rahul sir's height is this much. That means there would be one gene in my DNA. There would be one gene in my DNA which is responsible for developing a protein. And this protein will basically lead to that growth hormone. And as that growth hormone is produced, then you will see the growth. And if that growth hormone is not secreted, or growth hormone is not working properly, then probably height would have been less. All right. And how that gene is expressed, how that gene is made, we'll understand that in some time. So gene is a portion of DNA which defines certain trait. Now, when we talk about Mendel's law of inheritance, Mendel explained that there are alleles which are specific portion of genes or specific form of genes which have expression in your phenotype, meaning, see, for example, you do understand we all are humans. Now, in humans, our 99.99% of DNA is same. That means in all our DNA we have similar kind of genes. That means we all have 5 fingers, right? We all have similar kind of a body structure. We all have basically 4 limbs, right? We have 2 hands, 2 legs. Basic kind of genes, 99.99% same. But there is a difference of 0.01% in us. Now, that inheritance, it comes from parents. You do know that. As I told you, I have black hair, not blonde. There would be a person in US or somewhere, they might have blonde hair. Why? Because certain specific genes which we call allele, that phenotypically can be seen. As I told you, the black hair. So alleles are some form of gene which are responsible for expression of that trait. And you do know that in case of sexual reproduction, as I told you, if you see this, in sexual reproduction, half set of genes or half set of chromosomes are coming from one side, other half is coming from other side. Now, you need to understand that every paired chromosome, that is why we have paired chromosome, every paired chromosome will have same kind of genes but may have different alleles. And depending on the kind of allele, whether it is dominant or whether it is recessive, your phenotype or your that genetic expression can be seen. If it is a dominant allele, you will see that expressed in the individual. If it is recessive, then that gene or that allele would be suppressed. Now let me give you an example. Now see, let's try to understand this from my personal example. As I told you, I have brown eyes. Let's try to understand this concept of alleles. Now say this is Rahul sir. I told you brown eyes. All right, brown eyes. Now for this, you need to get information from one side, that is the father's side. You also need to get information from the mother's side. Now whichever gene is responsible for the eye color, from the father's side, I would be getting half set from the father's side, half set from the mother's side. And whatever allele is present here, if one of them is dominant, say brown eyes is a dominant allele. If one allele connected to eye, it is dominant, brown eyes would be expressed for sure. But if one of the allele, you do know that father set of chromosome, they come from their grandparents, mother set, they come from their grandparents. That means there is an equal probability of father having both the dominant alleles, or even mother having both the dominant alleles, or one dominant, one recessive as well. It all depends on the probability of the genetic development from different generations. All right. So how would I get brown eyes? Brown eyes means I would be having the allele for brown eye to be dominant. Now if I have this allele, then brown eye would be expressed. Now if you're not able to understand this, let me just explain through another example. As I told you, alleles, for every gene you have two alleles. Now that allele can be a dominant allele. Now it is written here as B itself. Let me just give you from brown. It can be dominant. I am expressing dominant allele in capital, and I am expressing recessive allele through a small letter. Now if I get a B allele, a capital B allele, I will get brown eyes. Now as I told you, there is a possibility that half the information coming from father side, mother side, when you just combine, say if one of the parent, father, he has one dominant allele, one recessive allele, and if mother has one dominant allele, one recessive allele, there is a probability of getting brown eyes 75%. But there is also a probability of getting recessive allele, blue eyes. All right. This is just an example to explain how alleles work. Right. Now Mendel, what he did not experiment with humans. Please try to understand. Gregor Mendel, he experimented with plants, where he gave certain laws of inheritance, how alleles express themselves. Now what he did was he took two plants of a species. One of them was tall, one of them had height, right? It was tall. So this was expressed as TT. Now both the alleles that have come from the previous generation, both have been dominant traits or dominant alleles. He crossed that with another short plant, and this short plant, of course, if it is short, that means both the alleles, they have to be recessive. So what he did was he crossed them. Now when he crossed them, he observed that whatever the first generation came, it was completely tall. All of them were tall. But he understood that in all these plants, now there is one dominant allele and one recessive allele. But that recessive allele has remained dormant, and the dominant allele, it has expressed itself. So we have 4 plants of same height. That means higher height. He saw that in the first generation, that recessive trait, it was not expressed at all. It remained dormant. But in the next generation, when he used these 2 plants as crossing, so he used these 2 and he crossed them, he saw that there was a 25% probability, or one of the variants was short. That means the same allele has expressed. Here you will see three variants crossed, which are tall itself, but they do carry dominant allele. One of them, it does not carry the dominant, it does not carry the recessive allele. All right. So by using these methods of crossing, he tested with different varieties. He tested with different varieties. He tested with different varieties and different traits as well. On the basis of height, on the basis of fruit, on the basis of wrinkled fruit, short fruit, different seeds, etc. He came up with three different laws of inheritance. He said whenever there is sexual reproduction means gametes should be formed. He said whenever gametes are formed, he said after the offspring is born, or when the offspring comes, that offspring will always show the dominant trait in the phenotype. This is called as law of dominance. Law of dominance, meaning always the dominant allele, it is going to express itself, whereas the recessive allele, it will remain dormant. That's why you see when he crossed these two, he got all the plants as tall. But you will see in all the offsprings, there is one recessive trait which has not been expressed at all. So law of dominance, if there is a dominant trait, it will be expressed. The second law was the law of independent assortment, meaning during the gamete formation, you do know the genes are separated. Half genes or half set of genes come from father side, half set of genes come from the mother side. Again, when I say half set, meaning say for humans we have 46 chromosomes. Correct? So we get 23 chromosomes, 23 side from father, 23 side from mother. But those chromosomes will have complete set of genes. You do understand, right? When I say half side from mother side, half from father side, we get half set of chromosomes, yes, but those will have complete genes. And in that gene, which would be dominant, which would be recessive, it is completely independent of each other. Means there is a 50% chance, or equal opportunity for hereditary factors to come from either side. Apart from that, during the gamete formation, another law is law of segregation, which simply says that whenever there is gametogenesis, there is segregation of genes in such a way that they are equally distributed, or they equally come from both sides. They equally come from father and mother side. All right. So these are the three laws given by Gregor Mendel. Let me sum them up in very short. As I told you, first law, it pertains to law of dominance, meaning a dominant allele will always mask the recessive allele. It is always the dominant allele which is going to give that expression, or which is going to express itself. That's the law of dominance. Apart from that, the second law is law of independent assortment, means alleles or genes on chromosomes, they are distributed randomly in individual organism. That means there is equal opportunity, equal chance of any gene, any allele expressing itself from either side, from the mother side or from the father side, equal opportunity for expression. Apart from that, the third law is the law of segregation, which I would say a simple extension of law of independent assortment itself. That means in any diploid organism, see, we are a diploid organism, we have 2n set of chromosomes, right? One set of chromosomes coming from father side, another set of chromosomes coming from mother side. When gametogenesis occurs, these are divided equally. In humans, 23 set of chromosomes come from one parent, 23 from other parent, and this genetic information will be combined. Now when I say 23 chromosomes, I'm repeating this again. 23 chromosomes will have all the genes. That means one set of genes or one set of alleles come from the parent side, another set of alleles they come from the mother side. Clear? Right. Now based on this knowledge, let's try to understand how sex is determined in humans. Now, there is a misconception in an Indian society that a woman is responsible, or woman determines the sex of the baby. Not like that. Right? We need to educate, or we need to understand that further. As I told you, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. That means we totally have 46 chromosomes. 46 chromosomes, correct? Now, when we look at human chromosomes, we have a maternal copy and a paternal copy. That means 22 chromosomes or 22 pairs are exactly same. 22 pairs are exactly same from maternal side and paternal side, right? Because as I told you, same species. I give you example also. Our 99.99% DNA is same. Yes. So we get 22 pairs which are exactly same from mother side also, from father side also. But there is one pair. There is one pair which is called as sex chromosome. So for a male, they have 22 pairs of chromosomes plus XY set of sex chromosome, and for a female, they have 22 pairs of chromosomes plus they have XX set of chromosomes. And you do know in the law of segregation or through the law of segregation, that means these would be divided equally. That means during gametogenesis, these set of chromosomes are going to be divided equally, meaning when a gamete is formed, now this gamete, it is going to have 22 chromosomes plus X, and this is going to have 22 chromosomes plus Y. Whereas on the female side, they can only have chromosomal set where it is 22 plus X always, 22 pairs plus X always. And whichever sperm, if it is the X sperm, if it fertilizes the ovum, you will get a female offspring. If it is a Y based sperm or Y sex chromosome based sperm, if it fertilizes the ovum, you get the male offspring. So means it ultimately depends on the male, which sperm fertilizes the ovum, because on the female side there is always X chromosome present. Even after segregation, you will see the same X chromosome itself. Clear? Now you must be a little confused, or what is this terminology? For different organisms, for different species, there are different set of chromosomes which decide this, which decide the sex of the offspring. As I told you, for humans, 22 pairs, or I would say 44 plus XX, and here 44 plus XY. When you segregate it, 22 plus X, 22 plus XX, 22 plus XY from these side. Both will combine. X or Y will determine the sex. Same thing for other animals, like for the chicken, you have 76 plus ZW. Now determination from the female side, sex determination from the female side, but on the male side, you have same set of sex chromosomes. Here there is a difference. But for the other organisms, say for insects, 6 chromosomes from XX from the female side, 6 chromosomes XY from the male side. You can see this for your reference. The nomenclature is given in a different way. Clear? Right. So we understood Mendel's laws of inheritance. We understood sex determination. Now let's talk about the concept of heredity and evolution. Now we understood heredity means how your genetic information is passed on to the progeny or passed on to the offspring. And I told you, even for asexual reproduction, there can be change in genetic information based on their environment. Do you remember that pointer? Now let's try to understand more about that. See, many people, they get confused between these terms, heredity and evolution. These are some of the fundamental topics. Both concepts are interrelated, of course. Heredity comes first. Now, because of this heredity, because of genetic information being passed from one generation to another generation, we see the concept of evolution. So heredity is basically transmission of properties from parent to the organism or the offspring, whereas evolution is the outcome of changes that happen to specifically inherited genetic information. Now you have a question, sir, how do this genetic information change? What is the reason for that change? It can be anything. And please remember, genetic information, it changes depending on the environmental factors. Meaning an individual has to adapt. Now based on that environmental factor, it can be any reason. It can be a mutation, meaning change in gene because of certain factor. It may be because of, say, radiation. It may be because of any other environmental factor. It may be because of hybridization. Now genetic changes can occur because of hybridization, meaning within a species itself. You saw how Gregor Mendel, through hybridization, he saw that if I crossbreed two species, or if I crossbreed two plants, he saw a tall plant and a short plant. He saw the offsprings, they were all tall. Again, hybridization can be one of the reasons, or recombination of DNA. Recombination of DNA these days We have also developed a lot of research and development in the biotechnology domain. So recombinant DNA technology has come up. Recombination can be one of the reasons. Apart from that, natural selection can be one of the reasons for genetic information change. Geographical isolation can be one. You can see this especially with the bacteria. Say for instance, bacteria. You think, sir, bacteria, there is no concept of sexual reproduction there. That means in the offspring, technically I should not see any sort of genetic change. Why? Because it is clonal reproduction. The same bacteria, it simply copies, it makes itself into two. It basically copies itself. Then what is the case of the genetic change? Say, for example, if the location changes, if there is some sort of isolation, you find some bacteria which are adapted to chemicals, some bacteria which are adapted to heat, some bacteria which are adapted to something else. So that genetic information has changed because of isolation. It can also be because of genetic drift or gene flow for different species. We'll understand these terms in some time as well, right? So evolution can happen because of these reasons. Let's try to understand more about this concept of evolution. You have a question, sir, is evolution always beneficial? You told it may be because of environmental reasons. Yes, but is it always beneficial? You cannot say it, right? Evolution may be beneficial, and in most of the cases it is beneficial because an organism or a species is trying to adapt, but it can also lead to adverse results. Let's take example. Say we have some beetles. The beetles are some insects, and generally beetles are red in color. Now you see, if there are beetles on a plant and if all of them are red in color, what happens? The crows can come and they can eat them. The beetles are basically prey for this predator, that is crow. So if it is red in color, it can easily see it and it can capture it. So what happened? To survive, one of the beetles, it had genetic change and it became green. Now you see, if the beetle is green in color, the crow cannot see it, so it has higher chance of survival. So over a period of time, what happened? Whatever red beetles were there, they were continuously eaten. They were continuously eaten by the crows. That means their population goes down, and at one point of time, you will have all the beetles which are green. Means they have now found out a means of survival. They have found out a means of survival for themselves. So this is beneficial for them. I would say the first example is a positive example where their population has increased. But many a times it might be adverse also. It might be reverse also. And evolution can happen like this as well. Now this is an example where there are red beetles. Now red beetles, one of them has transformed itself into a blue beetle. This is not useful because the crow was able to see the red beetle, it captured it. The crow will also see the blue beetle. It will capture that also. That means it is not beneficial from the point of view of survival. If it was green, because it was able to camouflage itself, because plants are green, so crow cannot see it. But here there is no advantage from the crow side. But imagine they are surviving somehow. Both the species are surviving somehow, and some sort of catastrophe occurs. Say an elephant has put a foot on one particular tree or one particular plant, and that plant had all the red beetles. Now what happened was, because of this intervention of elephant, and it was very innocent intervention, all the red beetles are gone now. Only blue ones have survived, and blue ones will reproduce, and this blue species is produced. But please remember, it does not have any advantage. There is no advantage here. There is no advantage to safeguard themselves from crows, because the blue beetles can also be seen by the crow. But do understand, both of these are inherited traits, meaning there is something inherently changed in their genetic structure because of which they have changed their color. Why? Because they want to survive. Now here it thought becoming blue color might help it in survival, but from crows it has not helped. But somehow, because of some other factor, it might have survived. All right. There is another example of acquired trait, and this acquired trait is not a change in its genetic structure. For instance, see, there are red beetles. Now imagine these red beetles, in one particular area there are no crows. So these red beetles, what happens? They'll keep on eating the green plants, and their population has increased. But once those plants are consumed, they do not have any food now. And if they do not have any food now, then what happens? Their mass reduces. They become small in size. Now, this is not a genetic change. This is simply an acquired trait because of shortage of food. Say probably for one generation, you have low weight or low mass beetles. For another generation, yes. But by this time, what has happened? Those plants have also regenerated. And once they have regenerated, then you will see again the normal kind of beetles. Now, this is called an acquired trait. An acquired trait from environment. This is not genetic. And please remember, when the trait is acquired, it is not transferred to the future progeny. It is not transferred to the future progeny. It is simply depending on the environmental factors, that is shortage of plants. That's why I'm not able to get my food. And that is why you see that lower weight, or I would say in a colloquial language, these are malnourished beetles. These are healthy beetles. These are malnourished beetles. And these malnourished beetles will continue till they get food. Once they get food, they again become normal. They again increase their weight. This is an acquired trait. An acquired trait is not transferred genetically. It is only inherited trait. Inheritance. Red becomes green. Green has survival rate. That's the meaning of the inherited trait. All right. Now, because of this idea of heredity and evolution, people are trying to answer this question. How exactly different organisms, different species have come? And for that, the concept of speciation has started. Speciation. All right? Speciation. Why it comes? As I told you, different organisms have different set of chromosomes. Different changes have occurred over a period of time. I'm talking about billions of years now. So how it has changed? One is through mutation. Now, mutation is an inherent change in the genetic information because of any factor, and that can be transferred into next generation. It can occur because of genetic drift also. Now, genetic drift means the genes drifting, meaning change in the frequency of allele within the population. Remember, occurring very randomly. There is a chance drift possibility that the genetic frequency has changed or the allele frequency has changed. It can happen because of natural selection also. Natural selection means whoever is fit to survive, whoever is able to adapt, whoever is able to change, they survive. Now, please remember here, genetic drift in a specific way is called natural selection. Genetic drift is random, but once genetic drift or its reason has been identified, it becomes natural selection. There is another concept of gene flow as well. Gene flow means that there is a transfer of alleles from one population to another population. Gene flow, probably because of say migration or movement of organisms. Because of that, gene might flow. And due to these, what we have seen is origin of different species. Now, please remember, speciation and evolution both are connected concepts. If I have to explain you in a very simple term, let me just draw something and I'll try to explain. Now, this is called evolution. Now, within evolution, if you draw a subset, this becomes simply speciation. Meaning different species have come into being. So evolution is a continuous branch. It's a continuous branch where we say that all of us we have come from a common ancestor. Probably there was no life right at the beginning of the earth. There were unicellular organisms, but slowly and steadily complex organisms evolved, and from those complex organisms different set of species have evolved. We are Homo sapiens, and our ancestors are or in our Homo family, Homo sapiens family, or Homo sapiens is basically the humans, or in the we find so many organisms like the orangutan, the Hulon gibbok, right? We have different apes. Now all these, they belong to same family. You do know that there is speciation which has occurred. Now evolution is a broader idea, but speciation, it is a formation of different species. It is a part of evolution, but it is at a small scale level. It is a smaller process of evolution within a branch, one can say. And speciation occurs in a comparatively smaller period of time. Now the question is, sir, why does speciation occur at all? Why do different species come up? It may be because of two different reasons. One is because of geographic isolation, other one is isolation in terms of reproduction. So geographic change or geographic isolation, it leads to allopatric speciation, it is caused by physical isolation. Reproductive isolation, it's called as sympatric speciation, and there is one in between, it is called as parapatric speciation, which is caused because of partial geographical separation, again between the populations of same species. Now this, because of intermixing, because of interbreeding, the recessive alleles, so the recessive alleles, they slowly and steadily disappear. All right, that's the basic idea. Speciation and evolution. Now the question is, sir, I want to understand it further because I'm still getting confused. I'm not able to understand what is speciation. Speciation can occur because of some particular event. For instance, as I told you, all have common ancestors, but because of one particular speciation event, it may be connected to reproduction, it may be connected to some environmental factor, it may be connected to geographical isolation. You see that one specific species has evolved and other species has continued, meaning now these two species, they cannot intermix, they cannot reproduce. Clear? Right, that's the basic idea. All right, speciation versus evolution. Now, how have we understood all this? Because this is the human evolution. Human evolution from a primate, from an ape, we have come to this particular level. Now, we cannot go back now, right? There is no concept of intermixing or interbreeding now between these different species. Now, how have we understood all these things? So, you have told me many things. I have understood majority of them, but how have we studied this? Now, we have understood this from different evidences. For instance, fossil evidences. From fossil evidences, we have seen that billions of years ago, we have gained expertise into radiocarbon dating. Because of that, now we can decipher age. These days, we have also made advances into science and technology, and DNA analysis has started. Now, because of DNA analysis, we have been able to study evolution in a more cogent way. Apart from that, we also go for evolutionary relationship. For instance, you see that how we have evolved. Now we have 4 limbs, correct? We have 4 limbs, we have 2 legs, we have 2 hands. We see that there are many 4-limbed animals as well, different species. Yes, there is tiger, there is cat, there are feline species, are different species, but you see that there are 4 limbs, and somehow the human species or the human race, they have been able to advance their control and coordination. That means our genetic diversity, our genetic evolution has been in a better way, so that we are able to coordinate ourselves. We are able to walk only on 2 limbs, and the other 2 limbs are used for other purposes. We have developed the opposable thumb. But if you look at other organisms, if you look at other common organisms, we see that in evolutionary stages, we have hands. If you look at avian species, those avian species have 2 limbs, right? They have 2 feet. Some other adaptation has happened. Some have webbed feet, some have claws for their own protection. But if you look at the wings, what are those wings? Do you think those wings have, or their 2 limbs are basically their wings, 2 wings for flying? These are the kind of relationship that we have made and understood evolution slowly in studies. Apart from that, evolution has happened even in stages. As I gave you example of this here, human evolution through different stages, different animal evolution through different stages. And once you enter the next stage, that means the speciation has evolved slowly and steadily. Speciation has occurred. Different species have come. For example, the bonobo, the chimpanzee, gorilla, orangutan, gibbon, we say all are relatives. But you do see human race or human species is separate. Now, a gibbon can mate with another gibbon, but intermixing among these species is not possible because speciation has already occurred. And please remember, there's one more point, that evolution, it does not means progress. Evolution is not progress. Please try to understand this. If anybody says evolution is progress, no, it is not progress. Evolution is always related to environmental condition. Evolution is simply adaptation of an organism for a better life. It's not progress, but there is one progressive factor to it. I can say that if you look at any sort of organism, let's take example of this slide itself, you will see that there is complexity which is increasing. If I go in this particular direction, you will see that the complexity continuously increases, meaning there are complex organ systems now. As I gave you example, we have opposable thumbs. This is an extraordinary feature of humans. Because of this opposable thumb, we are able to perform so many activities. Our brain has billions of neurons and that is continuously increasing. That means our system is getting more and more complex by the day. If you look at different scientific research, different scientific papers, you will understand the number of neurons in human brain, it is continuously increasing. That means we are still getting complex, and that process of evolution, it is still going on. That does not mean progress per se. One needs to understand that. Clear? Right. I hope I have given you good insight into heredity and evolution. Again, from UPSC civil services perspective, I think this would be more than enough. We do not need to get into too much of details or too much of terminology or read about fossil fuels, read about different dinosaurs. Those are all the things which are not needed for us. But if there is anything, if there is any data regarding evolution, if there is any information regarding evolution from exam perspective in current affairs, say anything connected to radiocarbon dating or some old age fossil has been found which has helped us in solving the jigsaw puzzle of evolution, please make a note of that. An MCQ can be formed on that. All right. So that is it in this particular discussion. If you have liked this discussion, you can always follow me on the ID @Rahul Sai 222. Thank you for watching this again. Jai Hind.